Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome back to this week's lesson video. And this week I wanted to talk a little bit about standards, because I put up a video on Tuesday, I think it was, just playing over autumn leaves and kind of with a description, and yeah, it's a bit of a chilly day, so I'm just having a coffee. But put up a video with a description saying that you should really respect the simple tunes, and that's something I've learned over the years, and really the simple tunes aren't as simple as we really think they are. To get them to sound good is really an endeavor on its own, and I think it's something that, especially the more advanced you get as a musician, the easier it is to overlook. You know, as much as we love to go towards some of these tougher tunes or these burner tunes, you know, think of the Coltrane tunes like 26-2, Moment's Notice, Giant Steps, Countdown. Other tunes like shorter tunes, ESP is one of them, Yes or No. Other tunes like, what's another great one? Ana Maria, which I haven't played in a long time. I really need to get back to that tune in particular because it just has such a beautiful melody. You know, we want to get to playing these tunes and playing some interesting stuff that sometimes we kind of forget the simple things. And the simple tunes, I'm talking the Autumn Leaves kind of tunes, Blue Bossa, Satin Doll, Days of Wine and Roses, Beautiful Love, which I just played for this quick little intro, just a quick chorus, Alone Together, those kind of tunes, even just simple blues heads like Blue Monk, or another, just not a blues tune, but another monk tune, Monk's Dream. These tunes have a deceptive simplicity to them that once you get to a more advanced stage of musicianship actually becomes the challenge in the execution. So I wanted to really do a deep dive in this video, more of like a perspectives video, so to speak, talking a little bit about, you know, why we should probably respect the simple tunes, why we should pay attention to them. They've got some really great lessons in there. But before we get to, you know, possible reasons why we might disrespect the tune, so to speak, or why we, you know, the potential pitfalls of working with these tunes, I want to go back to the very beginning. And the beginning in the sense of these tunes are usually some of the first tunes we learn as improvisers. When it comes to beginning jazz improvisation, tunes like Autumn Leaves and All the Things and other such tunes, or tunes like So What, they are usually prescribed to beginning improvisers. Now, maybe some teachers out there might prescribe tunes because, okay, this was the first tune I learned, so you therefore have to learn this tune. But I want to establish, why are these tunes so commonplace? It's commonplace all over the world. Here in Colombia, some of the first tunes I've seen other teachers prescribe, and some of the tunes that I've prescribed, Autumn Leaves, Blue Bossa, All of Me, or some variation or the other, maybe with a couple more tunes sprinkled throughout. When I was in Dubai, those were the first tunes I ever learned when I was growing up there as a kid. And even comparing that to, you know, some people in the US, you know, some of the very first tunes they learn are those tunes. Why is it? Why is it that those tunes are the first tunes? Well, for one, they possess a sort of, they really kind of embody a lot of the essential things we need as improvisers. Strong melodies, awareness of forms and structures, the basics of harmony. For example, Autumn Leaves and All the Things You Are, they're some of the first iterations we see of cycle 5 progressions, which are very common, or heavy uses of minor 2/5s, major 2/5s, right? Another one, Take the A Train, you know, that's a very simple form, but very clear AABA structure. Autumn Leaves is a great example of motivic development and taking one idea and just moving it through the changes. You know, if you just take that opening statement, even the B section, C, very clear melody, very strong melody. And that's a key thing. The same thing with Blue Bossa. these are very strong melodies that are very easy for a listener to take in. And when you're a beginner improviser or someone who's just been exposed to jazz, that's one of the most powerful things you can really teach a student, is access to a melody. You know, sometimes I struggle with remembering some of the harder melodies, like Conception, or, you know, more intricate bop heads. But these ones always stick out. These melodies, like, even if I haven't played blue bossa in God knows how long, but that melody's still in my head. So there's something to be said for that. Now, unfortunately, this past experience with the tunes, you know, sometimes we remember a time where we maybe didn't play as good, and we probably have a subconscious reaction to that. So as we get better and better, and we get further and further from who we used to be as a beginning musician, we probably still have a subconscious memory of maybe not sounding so great on that tune, or the struggle of that tune, or that tune feeling more like an exercise than an actual piece of music, which is all too common across disciplines. Sometimes the very first pieces you learn, they don't feel so much like pieces of music. They can have a tendency, not always, but the tendency is there, to feel like an exercise. And it's these associations coupled with the very core reasons I just mentioned that sometimes we occasionally disrespect the tune. You know, sometimes I've spoken with a couple of friends and, you know, colleagues and people all around, and, you know, we all have those tunes that we just don't like. But sometimes if you dive a little deeper and probably try to figure out why you don't like a tune, it's probably because you heard some rendition that maybe wasn't so great, or wasn't at its best, or wasn't performed well, or maybe you have an association of yourself playing that tune and you didn't sound as great as you thought, so you kind of stay away from that tune for a little while. That's very common on Coltrane changes, and why, funnily enough, to put it in a more advanced context, someone tries Giant Steps for the first time, has a hard time, and probably gets embarrassed, maybe especially if it's at a session, and some players can have a tendency to avoid that tune for a while, because they're still kind of getting over that trauma of having failed at Giant Steps or a similar tune, unless they decide to get over it, sit in the shed for a while, and work on it. But the point being is that coupled with some of the stuff I've mentioned before, is exactly why some of these tunes get disrespected, or overlooked, or overshadowed, or, you know, just put to one side. And it falls down to, I would say, one of two reasons. The first of which being there is a very big hole in your fundamentals. I'm not saying this as an attacking statement or anything like that, it's just an observation. There is a very big hole in your fundamentals that probably needs to be filled, that could help bring out better musicality in those so-called simple tunes. I'll get to that in a bit, and I'm going to divide that into parts, which will be underneath with timestamps, as I've started doing for the latest videos. The second thing is just not approaching the tunes from a musical standpoint, not treating it as a piece of music. So let's break down that first piece, or that first point. There is a hole in the fundamentals. Oddly enough, the simple tunes have a very interesting way of opening up or acting as a mirror, so to speak, to you as a musician. I've found oftentimes quicker than any other type of tune or more advanced tunes, those tunes will show you that there is something missing that you might need to develop. For example, if you do not have melodic control over Autumn Leaves, or All the Things You Are, you're going to have a very tough time getting through and relaying convincing musical statements. If you don't have a great swing feel, or let's just not even treat this as swing, a great time feel period, no matter what feel you choose to do it in. You know, could be straight eighth, could be Afro 6/8, whatever. If you don't have a good time feel, some of these tunes will just feel stagnant, or they'll feel nebulous. You won't feel like you're really conveying anything with conviction, which can be an issue. If you have issues keeping track of the form, you know, the rest of the band could be on the second A section and you're on the B, which can happen if you're not keeping track of the form, or maybe you miss certain transitions. Even on a simple tune, because you take it for granted and you think, I can do this already. when maybe, and I've had to humble myself a number of times on some of these simple tunes, maybe that isn't the case, and you have to go back and fix that. Another example is Autumn Leaves and All the Things You Are as well have very strong indications of thirds. The melody, if you pare down All the Things, right? It's all thirds movement. Right? It's based around that. So if you can't tackle thirds, if you can't hit that third convincingly, then you're going to have a hard time indicating the harmony. Same thing with your comping. You see, the myriad of possibilities of where the problem could be are endless, but playing a simple standard that doesn't have too much information or too much harmonic information, or it's not an up-tempo or whatever it may be, can expose some of those flaws and show you what you need to work on. So I urge you to really consider this. Really treat these tunes with respect, because they will humble you if you aren't paying attention to what you're doing and if you're not careful. The second point is more of a holistic point, and this is something that tends to happen the more advanced we get. Over time we start, it's very natural for jazz musicians especially to want to be looking forward to the next thing, to want to be looking ahead and seeing, what can I build, what is the next thing I can tackle, how can I use this substitution, how can I use this idea. Jazz musicians focus very much on how we can build and expand. As such, this means we eventually get to shedding some of the harder tunes in the repertoire, and inevitably they pop up at jam sessions. Sometimes you go play a session, maybe someone calls a lesser known tune like Bolivia, or someone calls Along Came Betty, which is not an easy tune. Lot of movement, or something like Isfahan. Again, more complex than, let's say, an Autumn Leaves, but the foundations are still there. And somehow when we start focusing on these tunes, we kind of get obsessed with that and kind of forget the tunes that really taught us. And as I said before, sometimes we treat them like an exercise. This can carry over into your present day. Your memory of what Autumn Leaves sounded like could carry over, and for that I recommend just listen to some great versions. If someone like Keith Jarrett can create magic out of Autumn Leaves, or breathe new life into Danny Boy, or Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or another standard like If I Should Lose You, which isn't the most difficult of standards, but what Keith Jarrett does with it is incredible. Or, you hear Gonzalo Rubalcaba play Autumn Leaves, or Schofield play Alone Together. You hear what those guys can do and how they can keep finding something new. That's probably an indicator that maybe there's something else there. And maybe, and it's something I have to remind myself of as well, to use myself as an example. I don't consider myself a standards player, truth be told. I've learned standards, I keep learning standards, because I find that learning through music is the best way to actually learn music, not just studying a concept. You have to actually apply it. I don't consider myself a standards player as such, but I found my greatest leaps and bounds in musical progress have been through learning standards, or just learning tunes, period. Whether they be the American Songbook, Brazilian, or whatever it may be. So the point stands to reason is that, I'm someone who's coming from a more compositional background, but learning this stuff helps me just open up a little more and see things as music, and it just kind of, for lack of better words, it teaches me something new every time. And, if you're someone who's a gigging musician who probably plays a restaurant gig, a cruise ship gig, or, goes to a jam session, you're going to start seeing the same tunes every now and then. I've had multiple experiences where maybe we've had to play a tune that we played last week or a day before, or we played the same tune probably 20 times in a week. But each time we've got to do something new, or else we're going to go insane and we're going to look tired and bored. And if the musicians look tired and bored on stage, imagine how the audience feels when they hear, or when they see musicians acting a little tired or a little disenchanted with the music. It affects the music as well on a musical level. So you learn to inject something new every single time you tackle this tune. And, you know, if you're having a hard time getting into the musicality of a piece, let's say like an Autumn Leaves, try something different. What happens if you put it in a different feel? If you do it, you know, it doesn't have to be the most revolutionary thing in the world. You can try what happens if you put it in an Afro 6/8. What happens if you normally play it as a medium up, play it as a medium, or play it as a ballad, or play it as an up-tempo, or put it in a different time signature. Change the key. Something, what was it? I was shedding, what was the tune? Like Someone in Love. And that tune is, was shedding it and I was just going through all 12 keys, and I found, aside from the normal C and E flat that you usually hear that tune in, the tune sounds great in A and E. B is quite nice, and D flat is also cool. Another tune that's cool in D flat is Stella. Stella in D flat takes this dark and moody ambiance, which is really interesting and presents you a different thing altogether that keeps your interest. So I hope this lesson and rather talk has been interesting and useful for you guys. For the more experienced musicians, I hope it's giving you an insight as to what you can do to maybe breathe some new life into standards and try something different, and also maybe has inspired you to go back and review some standards that you maybe haven't touched for a long time, maybe some of those standards that you haven't touched since you were a beginner. Think All of Me, St. Thomas, some blues heads, Autumn Leaves, all the things, you know, there's a whole list. And for the beginning improvisers, if you just so happen on this video, I hope this kind of sets you up for where you might want to go and gives you a new path to follow. That these tunes aren't just exercises, they're not something your teacher just prescribes to you. My words of advice for the beginning musician is treat it like a piece of music, really get inside the melodies, learn how to play the melodies, learn how to sing the melodies, check out recordings, just get inside the music. As for the Patreon people, those who are subscribed, I'm going to be doing a little checklist that I'm going to be putting up there instead of an extended lesson, because I think this is pretty much a lesson in and of itself. So the checklist will have, you know, things you can do, things you can practice. Have you done this on a standard yet? Have you tried this? Are these potential problem spots? And I think that'll be a great guide for your practice sessions. So, until next time, take care, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.